Everyone. So I just wanted to record a quick video that kind of gives us the overreaching concepts from last week and brings them into this week. So last week we learned about creating layers and controlling lines by layers. And these are the number of layers we might want to create for most mechanical drawings. And these would be the layer names. Well, what I want to do is show you how we can abbreviate those and make them 3-letter abbreviations, just to make it a little bit easier to write out the layers. And also there can be different names for some of the lines, like visible can be also called object. So I'm just going to apply what we've learned from the last class to the next assignment by taking a look at what we're going to be doing for the next assignment, and I want to identify on this drawing what we would need for layers. So let's start by creating a list of the layers that we would need. We need an object layer for all the visible edges of the views that we're seeing. I can see that we would need a hidden line layer. We need center line layer. And eventually, not this time around at the submittal, we're going to be adding dimensions, so it's not a bad idea to add those layers. And then we need a layer for the view, border rather. And then this is the first drawing where you're going to actually set up a viewport and set the drawing up to scale, so we'll also need a viewport layer. So what I want you to get used to is looking at the drawing before you get started and kind of jotting those things down. What do I need for layers? What do I need for drawing setup, basically? The other thing I want to point out, because it's maybe not entirely clear with this assignment, these numbers that we're looking at are decimal, and they're fairly small numbers. So what I want you to get used to doing is recognizing when something is in imperial units or in metric units, just by looking at the units that are, or the dimensions, the actual size of the dimensions that you're reading. This is an imperial drawing for a couple of reasons. 1 millimeter would be awfully small, and we can, I can tell you, you maybe shouldn't assume, but I can tell you that this is being represented on this A size or 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper at a scale of 1:1. So 1 inch makes a lot more sense than 1 millimeter. The other things to look for is when we're looking at a metric drawing, you will see a 0 in front of the decimal places on a metric drawing because that's the standard. So if you see a 0 in front of the decimal place and you're looking at fairly large numbers, 1 inch, for instance, would be, there's 25.4 approximately millimeters in 1 inch. So instead of 1 inch, we'd see 25 here for the size of that circle, for instance. So this tells us that this is in decimal inch. So I want to start this drawing in imperial. So I would begin the drawing by going into a new template, and I'd create those layers. So I'm going to make an object layer. I'm going to use OBJ for object, a center layer, CEN for send, a hidden layer, HID for hid, dim layer for dimensions, TXT layer for text, BOR layer for border, and then we know we're going to need a viewport layer. So I want to remind you that I made those layers so quickly by just starting by hitting new layer and then hitting a comma every time I finish creating the layer name, and it automatically creates another layer for me to name. If you end up doing that one too many times and you get an extra layer, just simply click off the layer, and then you can highlight it and then right click on it and delete it to get rid of that layer. Delete layer like that, and it will go away. The other thing you can do once you've created your layer names is make sure that you hit the refresh button, and they will reorder in alphabetical order. If you click on name, they will reorder in reverse direction. If you click on color or line type, they will reorder based on the color and line types. So that's another way of organizing your layers temporarily if you need to get to a layer, all the layers that are center lines or all the layers that are color blue. You can do it by clicking on the header at the top. So for the hidden layer, I'm going to use color cyan. And for the center layer, I'm going to use magenta. For the dimension layer, I'm going to use this color 11. Object, I'm going to keep white. Text is going to be green. And my viewport, I usually try to give a really kind of color that I don't use in any of my other places. So I kind of give it a color I don't really like. So I remember that's the viewport layer. And then border and object can stay the same. Both border and object also should be set to line weights that are heavier, so that when you look at the border, you can see a nice bold border. And I need to load the center and hidden line types for the two layers that I have here that will have a pattern. So I can load that center to line type. Notice that it's coming from ACAD LIN because it's an Imperial drawing. This was a metric drawing. This would say ACAD ISO LIN, and the pattern would be slightly larger, by 25 times larger actually. So I want to create hidden layers or line type as well. So I'm on the center layer. I'm going to click on center and hit OK. And the hidden layer, I'm going to click on hidden and hit OK. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out as well, because I think one or two of you did this, is when you create a new layer, let's say we wanted to create another layer that we forgot about. Depending on the layer you're on or highlighted, if we click on new right now, it's going to copy all of the characteristics of that layer. So what can happen is you can end up with a lot of layers that have the incorrect line type because of which layer you started off with highlighted when you clicked on the new button. Or you can be smart about it and look at whatever layer, let's delete that, whatever layer has most of the characteristics you're looking for, you make sure you highlight that layer first and then hit the new button. And let's say we wanted a chain layer like we did in the last one we know was supposed to be center too. All I need to do now is change the color and change the line weight. And I have the chain layer, but at the center two line types already loaded. So those are a couple of little things I wanted to point out that are related to what you learned last week and that help you out with this week's drawing. This week's drawing is an actual drawing, and I would recommend starting on the object layer. And I'm going to actually create one more line type for you to work with. I'm going to highlight the viewport line layer rather to start with because it has the characteristics that I want. I want to actually set it so it's not to print. And then I want to duplicate it and create a cons layer or con layer. And this I'd give a color too that that makes it clear that it's construction lines to me. And what will happen throughout the semester is these will be colors that you'll want to associate with the same layers all the time. So as you're working with your drawings, you're always just going to know whether or not things are on the right layer just based on the color that you're used to using for that particular layer. So it's a good idea to be consistent with these colors that you use for these layers. But now that I have a construction layer that's set to not print, I can add a miter line to this drawing to help me transfer information from one point to the other. So I'm going to start by double clicking on the object layer and then start the line at 0.25, 0.25. And I realize you already have a video that you can follow, but this is just going to show you some other ways to solve the same problem. 4 inches in the 0 direction. The height is 2.5. The width is 4. And then I can just hit CL for close and close that line. Now I'm going to begin the right side view by just starting the line command and tracking off of that bottom edge over 2 inches. There should be 2 inches between views. Now take note of the dimensions that we have. This direction, the width here is 225. The height is 250. A lot of people make a mistake with that. So I'm going to put in 225, 250, and then we know this is 0.5, and then this is 2, and then I'm going to use this tracking to figure out how far over I need to go, and then close that. All right, now is the time for me to put in the miter line. So I'm going to go to the construction layer and draw a line from this corner here. Notice I didn't put the fillet in yet. I want the angle of that line to be a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to switch this to 45. and then it should snap to that 45 degree. And it doesn't make any difference how long I make it. I just want to make it long enough so that as I construct the lines that go up to that miter line and then over to the top view, it will give me the width information that I've already established in this right side view. So with my construction line layer still, I'm going to project lines up from the front view and then project lines from the right side view. And by the way, I'm repeating these commands so quickly just by hitting enter. So in AutoCAD, whatever command you've used most recently, I'm going to hit F2 to show you. I can just keep repeating that command by hitting enter to get out of the command and then hitting enter again to repeat that command. Try that out. It's a time saver. So I'm going to use L for line and click on the line here and hit escape. Now I'm going to hit enter. It starts the line command again. And then I'm going to hit enter to get out of line and hit enter again to start the line command again. All right, so this is kind of what we do when we're drafting. We draw these lines out with construction lines, and then we can kind of see where that top view should be. So now I can just switch to the object layer. And if I turn my line weights on, I can really see the difference between my construction lines and my object lines. And then I can start drawing using the line command again, right on top of my construction lines, where those object lines would appear for that top view. So let's go back down to the front view here and make sure that we put that one feature for the height of the leg of the right side view. And then I'll use F for fillet, set the radius to 0.5, and create the filleted edges in this corner and this one. I know that I have a circle, so I'm going to use the circle command this time, and I have my midpoint tracking turned on. So I want to track off of the midpoint of this line up 1 inch. And then put in a diameter, de-enter, of 1. Up here, this circle's 2 inches in diameter, or I can do circle again, pick the midpoint of this line, and put in a radius of 1. Now I use trim, TR for trim. And with trim, pay attention to what it's asking you to do. It's asking you to select cutting edges. Well, I want to get rid of this half of the circle. This line will trim that circle right there in the center to allow me to get rid of this half. I also want to get rid of this middle portion of the line. Well, this circle cuts that line exactly where I want. So both of these end up being trimming edges. When I'm done selecting the objects in my drawing as trimming edges, I have to tell AutoCAD. So I hit enter, and now it's saying select the objects to trim. And if you put your cursor over it, it'll give you a preview of what will happen if you select one side or the other of the circle. You can see with AutoCAD, you want to select the side that you want to remove to get rid of this part that you want to remove. Same thing with the middle part of the line. And the construction line is still there. That's okay. But that shows us all of the object line information. Nope, not quite. We do need object lines here and here. And we've got the object lines laid out for this project. So we also need to add hidden lines. So I should just be able to go to my hidden layer because I've already got my line types and line weights loaded. I can use the line command and project off of the quadrant. Now, what if you don't have the quadrant selected? Just go ahead and click on the arrow next to your object snaps and make sure you put a checkbox next to quadrant, and that quadrant object snap will become available. Just repeating the command by hitting the enter key one more time. I'm going to do that here and one more time for the right side hidden lines. Now, this is where we can use the miter line again. I'm going to use a trick called temporary tracking to get this line to go in the right place. So I'm going to type in L for line, and then I'm just going to type in TT, short for temporary tracking. And I'm going to track off of that midpoint over to the miter line. And then I'm going to track down from that point and create the actual hidden line in that right side view. So what that did was position that hidden line exactly this depth of 1 inch in from the edge. Okay, and now we're just looking at center line. So I'm going to go to the center layer and type in DimSend first. So what does DimSend mean? Let's find out. We're going to hit F1. And F1, while we are in a command, we'll usually go to the command that we are in the process of using. But sometimes you got to do this a couple of times, because when you first type in F1, it just opens up the generic help menu for AutoCAD. So now that I've got it open, I'm going to hit F1 again. And this time it goes to the DimSend system variable. And it explains what it does. Controls the drawing of circle or arc center marks. So I can only apply a DimSend to a circle or arc. And we have some other commands that are associated with it. Dim center allows you to place a center mark. Dim diameter is the command we use to create diameter dimensions, and dim radius creates radial dimensions. So somehow DimSend has an effect on these three commands. If we look at what we can set it to, the value can be set to 0 if we don't want any center marks to be shown at all. It can be set to a negative value if we want the center lines to extend past the circle, and it can be set to a positive value if we just want the tiny little mark in the center of the circle, and that's it. So let's see if we understand this correctly. I'm going to look to see what the center mark is set to right now by using the DCE command to place the center mark with the setting that it's set to right now. So I'm going to type DCE and pick the circle. And so we can see that it puts just a little crosshair in the middle. Now I'm going to type in DimSend and see what the value has been set to. And it's set to 0.09. It's a positive value. So if we look at that description again, a positive value, a value higher than 0, results in just a center mark. But if we change it to a negative value, the center lines are drawn. I want to see what that looks like if we change it to a negative value. So I'm going to erase that center mark. I'm going to type in DimSend and put in negative 0.09. Okay, so that's less than 0 now. And do the same exact thing, DCE is short for dim center, and place it on the circle. And there's the difference. These lines extend as soon as we make that a negative value. Now, according to the instructions for this assignment, I believe you're supposed to set that center mark to negative 0.0625, or 0.06 is fine if you're lazy. And then use DCE to place the center mark. Now that you understand why you're doing those things, the DimSend set to a negative 0.06 will extend these center lines. What does the 0.06 stand for? Let's find out. If I do a distance between the center of the center mark and the edge of the first little crosshair in the middle, it is a value of 0.06. Now things are making sense, aren't they? If I do that again between these two gaps, it's a value of 0.06. If I do that again from the end of the circle to the edge of the line that extends out, I bet you can guess what it's going to be, 0.06. So that 0.06 sets these gaps in the size of the center mark, and then having it be set to negative extends these lines out beyond the edge of the circle. So that's how you're going to get the right kind of center mark based on understanding what those values for DimSend mean. Right now I'm going to copy the center mark. Using the quadrant of the circle, I can drag this now so that my cursor and the center mark are centered together. If I drag over to the midpoint of that line and then drag back over until those snap, I can correctly place that center line. I'm going to do the same thing up here because I'm still in the copy command. This time I just had to click the midpoint of the hidden line. And then I'm going to use DCE to place the center mark on that larger circle. But I want to get rid of that extension line that's coming here, and I want to get rid of these little gaps. So I'm going to do it by just grabbing this and stretching it in this direction, 0.12. 0.12 is 0.06 minus 0.06, right? So that I made this gap the same as 0.06. So I just did a little math in my head. So when I grab that grip and drag in this direction, 0.12, so I end up with the same gap here. Now I want to copy just the horizontal lines from this quadrant over to this hidden line and we end up having all of our object lines and center lines and hidden lines set up correctly, using our construction lines here to make sure we transfer information from the right side view to the top view and vice versa. So this is now correctly laid out, and it's ready for us to add dimensions and ready for us to set up and lay out. The one other thing I wanted to show you how to do so you can start correcting your own work is I want to show you a couple of commands that you can use to make sure your drawings are done correctly. DI is a command for distance, and that allows you to check the distance between 2 points. So here's an example where I would use that. What if I wanted to make sure that these views were exactly 2 inches apart? If I type in DI at the command line and click the distance between the two endpoints and read the command line to see what I get for a value, it's showing me that it's exactly 2 inches, so I know that that's correct. Let's do it again and check from the edge of this view down to the edge of the front view. Do I get the same value? Yes, I do. So I know that that's correct. So distance is a great tool to use to check your drawing. LI is short for list, and it lists the properties of an object or objects if you select more than one. So let's see if we wanted to check the features here to make sure that this line is exactly 0.5 inches. I could type in LI for list, select that line and hit enter, and it would tell me that the length of that line is 0.5. If I wanted to check the diameter of the circle, list, select the circle, and it gives me the radius of the circle. So list is very useful to use to make sure that the features of an object are correct. And the last one that I find useful is ID, which provides the X, Y, and Z coordinates of a point that you select on the screen, okay? So for instance, if I wanted to make sure that I did this drawing from the instructions, this point right here should be at 0.25, 0.25. If I ID that and click on that intersection, I can look up in the command line and see that I started the drawing at the correct location of 0.25 in the X and 0.25 in the Y. So with these commands, you can check your drawing before you give them to me and make sure that your drawing is accurate. So those are the things I wanted to show you in addition to what you had for the videos for this week that I think will be helpful in making you successful with this assignment.